And then you have a case where you'll define a method, and then, for example, if you extend this on the DOM, for example, you'll define a method that works in most cases, but then let's say you run into a situation where an element implements that same method, like for example the select method on input elements, and you had a select method for, like, say, querying things. That would run into a conflict. You couldn't use your method because it would be paved over by the native.
So what are the sandbox natives doing? What is that going to help us with?
Okay, sandbox natives help avoid that because you don't modify the window constructors. You modify your own custom ones.
Okay.
And so it's kind of like namespacing. It just creates a whole new workable native that you can that works the same as real natives. I mean, like the length on arrays works, strings work, compiling methods and the new function works. You can extend the object prototype and things that you normally couldn't do.
What about from a performance perspective? If you're basically rewriting all these natives into a sandbox model, are there going to be performance implications that developers need to be concerned about?
There's going to be some performance implications, but the center of these methods are still natives. So a lot of the heavy lifting is still being done by the browser and not by the JavaScript implementation of it. The only thing that I do for compatibility is for training is I wrap methods that don't return objects and make them return objects, so everything is chainable from the extent, and that's the only performance hit you get. And funny enough, the browsers that return objects are IE and Opera, and so the slower browsers actually get a boost because I'm not having to wrap array methods that return arrays because they already returned them sugared.
Gotcha. So. Now, you just mentioned browser performance, and obviously, there's a lot of JavaScript libraries out there, and a lot of them make some claims, but I've seen some of the results from FuseJS, and you have some very impressive results, especially on DOM select traversal. Tell me about some of the things that you've done to really improve that, because it's actually very surprising.
Okay. Basically, I designed Fuse to have a very open system. I didn't want to pigeonhole devs into a specific engine or a specific code base for certain aspects of the framework. I wanted developers to plug in their favorite selector engine or eventually their favorite script loader into it, so I don't have to worry about that.
Right.
And so the engine I decided to go with by default is NWMatcher, which is created by Diego Perini. And basically the way his works is you have a selector and it compiles a custom method for that selector. Which means it compiles it to where it's not having to check, is it this, is it that? It just creates the optimum path to find the results.
Gotcha.
And so that's what it does. And so that's what I use, and that gives me the performance on traversal going up and down.
So that's very neat. How did you manage to be able to abstract FuseJS so that you can drop in, let's say, Sizzle, or you can drop in Acme, or any number of different things?
Basically, I reduced the number of API points to 2, and that allows me to just pave over my method and replace it with a method that calls their engine. So I have a select and a match, and then I just connect those 2 methods up to the selector engine.
Gotcha.
And that works.
Now, obviously it's a very crowded space now. There's a lot of great libraries out there. You have YUI, you have MooTools, you have jQuery, Dojo, a lot of big players. What kind of prompted you to say, I'm going to create a brand new library? What is the thing that kind of drove you?
Well, FuseJS is a fork of Prototype.js. I liked Prototype.js, I started with it, but I wanted to go in a different direction because I noticed that they kept having problems with things conflicting and all of that, and I said, well, there's got to be a better way to do this, and so that's why I forked, and it meant to do that.
Now, one of the common namespaces that I think a lot of libraries use is the $sign. Are you kind of going down that route as well?
No, I don't have a $sign. If someone wants a $sign, they can do var and $sign equals Fuse. And they get it.
And the reason I ask is more because of compatibility. Because with so many libraries being used right now and mixing and matching between different frameworks, I wasn't sure if you were going down that route, especially since you're a fork of Prototype.
Right, yeah.
So I wasn't sure if that was still kind of an issue.
Now I have the $sign, but it's on fuse.util.$sign.
Oh, okay.
And so I can dump it back to the global when I run this Prototype.
So if somebody's coming to you and they're looking at all the various libraries, what's going to be a compelling reason for somebody to leverage Fuse as opposed to going to Moo or jQuery or Dojo?
Okay, well, if they already have an existing library that they're using, for example, Prototype, FuseJS will emulate popular libraries, starting off with prototype, moving to jQuery or EXTJS later.
Well, explain what emulate means. Let's go into that.
Okay, emulate means, and I guess the simplest way to describe this is you delete prototype.js.
Okay.
You then drop in FuseJS, and then you add the emulation layer JS. So with those two things, you then run as if you are prototype. Your existing application thinks it's prototype. It's got the same namespace. It's got the same methods. The only difference is that empty shell of a framework is being pointed back to FuseJS.
Gotcha.
And so all the internal calls go to FuseJS.
So that veneer layer basically will allow you to essentially replace whatever library you had before,
right.
And your application should in theory run with no change.
Right, with no change. You don't have to relearn a new syntax. All the documentation for your methods are the exact same, so you don't have to relearn documentation. It's all there. The difference is that when I emulate a framework, my objective is to make it worthwhile to switch. So I'm going to try to get better performance, better compatibility. And as I go in and fix bugs for one framework that I'm emulating, it's shared by all the other emulated frameworks because it's all coming back to one core FuseJS.
Gotcha.
And so that's really cool. Is jQuery fixes bugs, prototype doesn't fix, and other libraries fix bugs, others don't fix. But as I start supporting them, all the bugs are fixed in the core Fuse. And so even whenever you want to switch frameworks, like say you're running as prototype,
right?
And then you say I want to switch to jQuery, and so you want to run Fuse as jQuery. You don't have to worry about a new bug coming in, a browser bug that wasn't covered by prototype, or that was covered by prototype but not jQuery. So it's really consistent. You don't have to worry about stuff breaking whenever you switch.
That's awesome. That's a pretty neat feature there. So how long did it take you to kind of be able to emulate all this functionality? Because obviously you're essentially emulating several different APIs.
Right. Starting off with prototype, it made it easy because I'm forking from prototype, so a lot of my API is very similar. But as frameworks develop and over time, their features and their functionality all kind of converge. They've all got ways to traverse the DOM. They've all got event management systems. They've all got ways to iterate over lists. And so usually the only thing that changes is method name and argument order. And most of the time, that argument order is the same too.
Right.
So jQuery has a couple cases where it's flipped, but then that's just handled in the wrapper layer when I pass it off to something else.
Right. Awesome. So when do you think FuseJS is going to be out and publicly available for people to at least start leveraging in a production environment?
Right. When we go beta, you'll be able to run as prototype. So, and by run as prototype, I mean that it'll be stable enough for you to replace prototype and drop it. And going beta, there's probably about maybe a month and a half left before I go beta. I finished all the major components like the JSON and the event system and all of that. I just have to go through and make sure that my element position codes and dimensions codes works in Quarks mode, because that was one of my new features, and I want to make sure that works and is ironed out.
Gotcha.
And then I'll iron out the emulation later and it'll be good.
Awesome,
Yeah.
Great. Well, I think I think everybody's going to be really excited to see FuseJS and some of the features that you're incorporating. The response that I've heard from your extensions of the natives, sandbox extensions, are really positive. A lot of people are excited about that, and so I'm really looking forward to seeing what Fuse is going to be all about. And even though I'm a little biased with them on the jQuery team, but I'm still really anxious to see what you're going to do. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. So hopefully I'll get out soon.
All right. Well, thank you.
Well,